a media mogul, titan of industry, philanthropist, and sports pioneer. Ted Turner died Wednesday at age 87 after an 8-year battle with Lewy body dementia. Turner saved the American bison population, preserved 2 million acres of land, donated $1 billion to the United Nations Foundation when the United States was about to default, won the 1977 America's Cup in sailing, owned the Atlanta Braves and Atlanta Hawks, won the 1995 World Series with the former, found the Goodwill Games as a means of easing tensions between the United States and Soviet Union, created CNN, the first 24-hour cable news channel, TBS, one of the first superstation cable channels, and obviously TNT. He nearly went bankrupt acquiring MGM, but regularly shrugged off any temporary financial pitfalls, standing for decades as the de facto president of Atlanta, considering how much he did for the city. In these circles, though, he is best known as the owner of World Championship Wrestling, which he founded by buying the assets of the National Wrestling Alliance and Jim Crockett Promotions in 1988. WCW immediately became the number 2 wrestling promotion in America behind the WWF. But it was not until 7 years after its formation, when Monday Nitro began and Eric Bischoff was put in charge, that it not only competed with, but briefly overtook Vince McMahon's promotion. Despite WCW's ability to build audience and gain serious market share, it was never a financial success due to outsized contracts, insane expenditures, and constant internal power struggles. Even though WCW created so much content for TNT and brought in tons of pay-per-view revenue, the talent was paid so much money, and WWF was committing so many own goals that the long-term perception that WCW could end WWF was more about the latter than it was the former. Turner was willing to eat the financial losses because he loved professional wrestling so much, and he loved competing with McMahon. That came to a head in 2001, though, when Turner no longer had control of Time Warner, the company he merged with Turner Broadcasting Systems 5 years earlier. A second merger with AOL saw Turner ousted as the head of TBS, with Jamie Kellner taking over, noting all the red lines on the balance sheet and not wanting to be in the wrestling business, period, partially due to WWF overtaking WCW and the latter seeing its ratings and financial prospects decline even further. Kellner canceled WCW's TV contracts, which ultimately led to the sale of its assets to McMahon. When the dot-com bubble burst, Turner lost $7 billion as the AOL Time Warner stock collapsed. The company ultimately rebounded and split, with Time Warner purchased for $109 billion in 2018, long after Turner had given up most of his stock and ability to make back substantial parts of his wealth. At the time of his death, his net worth was estimated to be around $3 billion, which is certainly nothing to thumb one's nose at, but a far cry from what it could have been, had some of his decisions with Time Warner gone differently. Now, in an age where there are more billionaires than ever before in the history of the world, it would be nice if some of them operated similarly to Turner and tried to make the world a better place. Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. Dada, with episode 887 of your favorite professional wrestling podcast. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and we are here to break down everything that happened over the last week in NXT and AEW, but not only that, Vintage Chris Vanini will be joining the program to discuss an item we completely missed from the last week in WWE, to review the Hulk Hogan Real American documentary, and to perhaps listen in as the Silver King breaks down everything else that happened on the last episode of AAA, which apparently he did not have time for on the prior episode of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. Now, we are going to get into all of that momentarily, but here off the top, as we get into the show, allow the Silver King to remind you that the Getting Over Wrestling podcast
is all about Defy.
So please head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify, leave a 5-star rating on Apple, take a little extra time, leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Also, do not forget to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast on Twitter and Blue Sky. You get episode drops, news, analysis, highlights on YouTube when you subscribe over there. You can listen to the show. You can watch full-length video interviews. And if you check the link in our social media profiles at Getting Overcast, you can do a ton of stuff. You can subscribe to the podcast. You can join our exclusive Slack channel. You can shop for WWE Shop, earn us some commission. Prices are the same. Discounts are the same. Whatever you want to do, make sure you find it at Getting Overcast. And since I mentioned our Slack channel, I did forget to note in the early portion of the show, there's another element of this episode that needs to be considered, and that is the first ever Hey Now Championship rematch going down between Stephanie Vaquer and Liv Morgan. More on that in a moment. All right, Vintage Chris Vanini is ready. He is officially on the horn for the next portion of this show, and as mentioned, we missed something significant from WWE television this week, which is not something that has ever happened before here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. So even though we closed the door on Tuesday, we're opening it back up here on Thursday. Let's get into the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Hey, yo. Survey says one more for the good guy.
Say hello to the back.
Don't sing it. Bring it.
All right, Vintage, this is going to be one and done, just like a ton of teams are going to be in the new NCAA tournament that was announced to 76 teams right as we began taping this show. Tiffany Stratton, backstage at SmackDown, said the United States Championship needs to be defended more frequently, and she's curious about an open challenge. Chelsea Green rolled up in her wheelchair, but then stood, acknowledging that she's healthy. This, of course, came before her heart arrhythmia that she had surgery for that we discussed on Tuesday's show. Chelsea said something about a birthday celebration that Tiffy declined. Kiana James then came up saying she wanted Julia to get her rematch. Stratton declined that too, giving it to James instead. Julia said, fine. And that was it. Holy hell, this division is booked terribly. Their only idea is a potential open challenge, which was just ended by Trick Williams and picked up by Oba on the other show in a different way, but nonetheless picked up. The only challengers are the people who have been around the title picture for the last 6 months. So why does it need to be open? Who's about to show up and challenge for this title that we haven't seen before, especially after all of these releases? Kiana and Julia are still together. Granted, this looks to be the start of their split, but Julia had so little agency that she just sat and watched as her de facto manager got a title shot instead of a rematch. How did Kiana even deserve the opportunity? I know Tiffy was trying to sow division between them, but still, Julia should not just be standing around shrugging like that. Chelsea is not even particularly funny in her limited lines in this segment. Normally, of course, she's hysterical. Can we please give these SmackDown mid-card women some characters, some storylines? Can we give them something? This was not bad. This was ugly.
0.0.
0.0, Mr. Blutarski.
Agree. I'm always surprised this is still going on. It feels like we're in a never-ending loop where none of these people can get away from each other. And again, WWE falls back on a lot of tropes right now, which is qualifying matches or triple threats or open challenges of sort. Not like we had 2 open challenges on the previous Raw with Becky Lynch and Obafemi, Trick Williams. Guys, put a little bit of effort into this, please. This is terrible.
I know Becky, was the grade bad or ugly?
Ugly.
I know Becky Lynch said hers was an open challenge. It never really was. She was just kind of like pontificating, what if I do an open challenge? So I'm not going to count that and suggest they're trying to do 3 at the same time, but they literally just did it for the men, ended it. Now they're picking it up for the women while Oba is doing one. And we had said the week prior, hey, we're okay with Oba doing an open challenge because now there's none of them. And his is different. It's not for a title. It's able to be separated from the rest. But this is not that. And if Stratton starts going out there doing open challenges, the reason why that concept works is because it's guaranteeing you quality television matches. When Ilya Dragunov did it, Sami Zayn, Carmelo Hayes, Stratton, it looked like she was on the trajectory to be a great in-ring performer. She has not been that since returning to the company. So, her match with Julia was pretty damn good. It was the best thing she's done in months. But the concept of her doing open challenges with that mid-card women's division is scary. Unless they're going to do something crazy and like make Fallon Henley the champion, give us a big surprise in 2 or 3 weeks. I can't imagine what they're doing. But as I said, it was one and done. So we are out of the good, the bad, and the ugly. But before we get to the rest of the show, the results are officially in from the first ever Hey Now Championship rematch with this guy over here, Vintage, trying to run a coup d'etat and clearly forgetting that
This is my show. My show.
regardless, I indulged the disrespectful disagreement and allowed all of you to weigh in on who should be champion coming out of WrestleMania. Yes, we're a few weeks removed. We still got it done, okay? We allowed all of you to vote on our Slack channel, and we set the stipulation that there would need to be a significant majority of dissenting votes in order to switch the title. And that is primarily because it's not how it's contested. It's something that Vintage and Silver King need to agree on here on the show. He contested it. He decided he needed to put it to a vote. I said, okay, well, you know what? Let's get to those damn results.
Gonna look good, but she's got me saying, hey now!
The Hey Now Championship is back on the line. And as I said, the first ever rematch champion, Stephanie Vaquer's black thong catsuit against challenger Liv Morgan's nude ring gear and dance performance that reminded of Britney Spears at WrestleMania. Well, not only did Liv fail to receive a significant majority of the votes, she straight up lost, with 68% choosing Vaquer over Morgan, fully understanding the effort from Stephanie in late March, that it was special, and frankly, more of a hey now moment, which is entirely what this is all about. So Vintage, while you eat your L in silence, at least briefly, that does not necessarily mean Vaquer is going to be forever champion. In fact, she has a couple legitimate challengers. First, there's been a lot of fervor around Fallon Henley's first 2 appearances on SmackDown. And while certainly deserving of attention, what I'm going to say to all of you is that you're simply unfamiliar with her game from NXT. Not that she doesn't deserve the sound drop.
Gonna look good, but she's got me saying, hey now!
But I would not call those efforts competitive for purposes of this segment. Now, before we get to Vaquer's next challenger, Vintage, what do you have to say about the putrid coup d'etat attempt that you tried to perform on the Silver King?
What were the final actual numbers? First off, I'm very disappointed.
68
in the
and 32.
listeners.
That's how the math works.
Wow. Disappointing, surprising. We'll get him next time.
Yeah, I mean, not surprised at all. Like, Liv, incredible. But there's something different and special about the Vaquer catsuit.
This comes too, like we were getting criticized by the listeners for Liv not winning / retaining earlier, a couple of weeks before
Pre-catsuit. Pre-catsuit.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And to me, I thought her entrance music video and all that stuff was even greater, but the listeners didn't agree, and I will drown my sorrows by pulling up the Trouble music video once again.
You're really going to subject yourself to that? That should be punishment, actually. You should be forced to listen to that song without watching the video 5 times. That is your penance for doing this and trying to usurp Silver King in this situation. But no, it's hey now, as we've explained many times, it's not just about the incredible look. It's about, is it a moment? Is it a surprise? Is it something that you never would have expected to happen the way it did? And that's why Vaquer's was so special. She ran out in that catsuit. You're like, what the hell is that? Oh my God, that is crazy. That is a hey now moment. And you need someone to kind of do something similar. That's how great it was. As I mentioned, though, none of this means that Vaquer is a forever champion. She has a number 1 contender. In fact, a strong, dare I say, underdog emerged on Monday Night Raw when Roxanne Perez came out in this animal print 2-piece that rocked a lot of folks, got a ton of fire emojis in our Slack channel, and fully deserves.
Gonna look good, but she's got me saying, hey now!
As such, the Hey Now Championship is back on the line after a hard-fought rematch just moments ago. Vaquer now goes head-to-head with a surprisingly strong contender in Perez. Vintage, I'm not sure I can trust your judgment anymore, but did Roxanne do enough on Monday night to upset Stephanie and take this title?
I would say yes. I think that Roxanne's outfit emphasized certain aspects in a way that it was meant to. In many ways that the Stephanie Vickers catsuit did as well. But yeah, it was like a leopard animal print type of thing. I don't remember if Roxanne technically got a title shot after WrestleMania, but
she received acknowledgement.
Yeah,
and we decided we did it in order. So Stephanie McMahon failed in her attempt. Roxanne failed. We noted that it was largely camera work that played that role. And then we got into the debate about Liv. So there were 3 defenses at WrestleMania weekend. Vickers, retained twice, and then we went into a rematch with Morgan. So now this is a fresh, new number 1 contender.
I will go with Roxanne, but as we know, it requires 2 people to create a title change.
It does. And, it's probably 6 weeks ago now that Vickers won this Hey Now championship. And when it occurred, I said on the show that it would be extremely difficult for her to drop that title. And there's been a lot of challengers over the last 6 weeks, legitimate challengers, situations where Vintage has called for it, others where I've been close. Here we stand, though, with Roxanne Perez doing something that I think was wholly unexpected. There were not just 1, but 2 separate appearances. And in both of those, it was not just the outfit, but the attitude. We are calling a massive upset in the Hey Now Championship. Shortly after retaining against Liv Morgan, a weary Stephanie Vickers falls to Roxanne Perez, the new Hey Now champion.
Gonna look good, but she's got me saying, "Hey now!"
An absolute stunner, Vintage, if I do say so myself. I did not think you were going to go for it. I was ready to call the upset, but acquiesced to the fact that we did not agree. You stunned me, and I think we have an underdog champ here. Well deserving, don't get me wrong.
Yes.
I think it was just a really long reign for Stephanie, and at some point, it was going to come crashing down and hurt inside.
Yeah, look, I mean, it's like Hogan at WrestleMania 9 against Yokozuna, or maybe a Money in the Bank cash in what Roxanne has done here. But it is a deserving champion. I have voted against Stephanie several times that she has retained, and I didn't want this to be just me hating on it, because obviously don't. But I thought Roxanne made a good effort, and I'm glad you've come around. It's opened up again now, and Stephanie now on the injured list, so
she is.
It'll be a while before she can get that rematch.
Indeed, and you know what? Having a fighting champion is perhaps not the worst thing in the world either. And we have someone who's going to be regularly out here defending the title on a week-to-week basis, whereas Stephanie's going to be on the shelf, and her taking the title home with her. We hated when Brock Lesnar was a champion who just sat around for 2 months, then came back out and decided to defend his title whenever there was a major premium live event ahead. Now we have a legitimate, champion who is carrying this torch, and Vickers will have her opportunities. We know she will, as will many other women on the WWE roster, and some men as well, because there have been some allowed Hey Nows for the men, including Finn Balor a couple weeks ago, that our audience requested and therefore received. So congratulations to the brand new Hey Now champion Roxanne Perez. The title is back up for grabs, and I don't know that this is going to be as long of a reign as Stephanie, who had the longest in the history of this title, the 4-month and 1 week history of this title. But nevertheless, a solid run, 6 weeks, first time that's ever happened. And yeah, I think there's going to be some movement now as the year progresses. So again, congratulations.
Are we or is somebody at all keeping track of number of reigns, length?
Yeah, so there is a listener who I asked to help with this, and I believe they created a Google Doc that is being updated. Now, they went a little bit overboard where there were picture references and every single defense was listed. I don't need all the defenses. What I need is a list of champions and how long their reign went, and of course, who defeated them for the title, just like any other, title reign list that you would see on Wikipedia. That's basically what I'm looking for. And I think, shots of the champions when they are champions is appropriate for bookkeeping purposes. But there is someone doing that. I believe they're keeping it up. They haven't had much to do in 6 weeks because she just, ran through the month of April, storming past every potential challenger. But yes, someone is keeping track of it. And we also did receive another question asking us what's going to happen to the Hey Now award in the 2026 Getting Over Awards, aka
the Meaties.
And as far as I'm concerned, whoever is holding the title at the end of the year is the winner of that award. I mean, that's pretty much how it needs to go. Now, we might be able to do a secondary award like honorary Hey Now Champion of the Year, perhaps the person who held the title the most or the longest. There's a lot of considerations here. We don't have it all together, but also the Getting Over awards are like, 7-8 months away. So we got time. We don't need to rush it right now. Vintage, despite your coup attempt here on the Getting Over Wrestling podcast, I am actually going to turn over the hosting duties to you for our next segment as we take a look at the Hulk Hogan Real American docuseries that debuted on Netflix a few weeks ago, and you and I finally got the opportunity to watch it over the last couple of weeks. In an interesting twist, despite Vintage being the one who needs to receive the punishment from the Hey Now Championship rematch, he basically punished me by forcing me Clockwork Orange style to watch all 4 hours of this docuseries in one day. Vintage, have you seen Clockwork Orange?
I've seen the scene you're talking about.
Okay, at least you understand the reference. I will cede to you. Please go ahead and lead this charge on Hulk Hogan Real American, airing on Netflix.
Also, I didn't make you do it in a day. This thing has been out for like 3 weeks, so we've
sure,
had time,
but you were
it.
pretty insistent that you wanted to cover it on the show soon, and time-wise, my only option was today in the show.
Well, while it's still in kind of in the ether.
Absolutely.
And
We're late on it. We normally would have done this 2 weeks ago, but yeah.
Yeah, but it was a lot going on. Post-Mania, all that stuff. So I'm not going to like recap the whole thing, but
Sure.
if you haven't seen it, it's 4 episodes on Netflix. They're all an hour long. The first one is about his upbringing. The second one is his peak WWE-ness. The third one is WCW, NWO, and things starting to go down a little bit. And the fourth one is all the post-wrestling career stuff. The drugs, the divorces, the racial comments, the stuff. That's all in the last one. And so many people have been talking about this for days, and I have so many thoughts on it that I'm not going to just spew out all right here. I will say overall, I thought it was going in. I'd heard a lot of people say it was bad and they didn't like it. And so I kind of went in with that. I came out of it thinking I thought it was quite good, but there was so much more to get into that you just, I guess, partly just couldn't in 4 episodes in 4 hours. Like, part of me was like, this could have been a Last Dance. You could have done 10 episodes on Hogan's career. He is the most famous and most consequential professional wrestler in history, good and bad. Everything during it, everything after it. And it didn't the only thing it didn't really get into, I think, at all, was his relationship with Brooke, his daughter, who they have been estranged for a number of years. She, I think, said she didn't want to be in it. She's been estranged from both of her parents, too. And they don't touch that at all. Nick, the son, is in it a lot. It's the last interview Hogan did, before he died. I thought other than that part, I thought they did touch on everything, the good and the bad. Obviously, some of it was presented more favorable than other ways. The Gawker trial, for example, was one, but they did talk about it. I would have loved to go even deeper into this, but I thought it did a good job of at least touching on pretty much everything about him and not ignoring the bad things either.
Yeah, I disagree in significant ways, I would say.
And I think a lot of people are with you on that.
Yeah, I agree with your take that they touched on as many things as they could in a 4-hour docuseries. The issue is that the life of Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea as well is not a 4-hour docuseries. It cannot be contained to that length.
No.
And when you
could have done a whole episode on his relationship with Macho Man, that's not,
they don't even talk about the Mega Powers exploding. The biggest storyline of his entire career. I know people will say NWO, that's a modern twist on reality. Mega Powers Explode was the greatest wrestling storyline in history until, I believe, the Cody Rhodes and Bloodline storyline, of course, just a few years ago in WWE and the way that concluded. But they didn't touch on it at all. They completely glossed over his relationship with Macho Man. They spent a lot of time on him and Ultimate Warrior and all that. So I found it seriously flawed, not only because of the time allotment, especially considering that last episode was the longest. It got 80 minutes, and we'll go through why that was the case momentarily. If that last episode was 2 hours and they dug a little bit deeper and shared more, legitimacy around Hogan, the stuff he did, how people reacted to it, the impact it had, I would have felt better about the docuseries in totality. I was left severely disappointed. You said we're not going to do a rundown show by show or anything good because I didn't take my notes that way. Why don't I, as a means of like continuing the conversation, go over what I liked about it, and then you can maybe come on the back end and say, hey, I agree or disagree, and here's other stuff that I liked that they covered. Okay, just as a way to go through.
That works.
So I enjoyed that he admitted at the very beginning in episode 1 that he's not tough and he was dumb to the facts of wrestling. So he was actually scared to even be involved in it in the first place. That to me was somewhat eye-opening. Also, he was raw about his family life growing up and how he never thought he would be a wrestler. The documentarians interviewed many of the right people. Bret Hart being his hater-ass self, saying he knew more about wrestling in the 80s than Hogan did at the end of his career. That was hysterical. But Bret also has every reason in the world to hate Hulk for reasons that they actually outlined during the show.
Yeah.
And having Jesse Ventura there to call Hogan on some of his bullshit, that was important. Even though it was centered around steroids, it was really cool to see there was one scene of Hogan, Macho Man Randy Savage, and Brutus the Barber Beefcake all training together in his home. And a bunch of time was also spent covering Hogan's lies about steroid usage, so that was key. Christopher Lloyd and Werner Herzog were totally unexpected contributors, but it was also fun to see both of them. The best part of the entire documentary was the splicing of WrestleMania X8, that match with The Rock, alongside WrestleMania 3 with Andre the Giant, basically doing like tent poles, even though I don't believe that was Hogan's last WrestleMania match. I think he fought Vince McMahon at one.
No, he fought Vince the next year. Yeah.
Right. So if it would have been nice if it was like the biggest match of his career, the Andre match, and then the last match of his career, The Rock. But still, the splicing of that was awesome, covering the Raw after WrestleMania, where he flipped back to Hulkamania and got like a 15-minute standing ovation. That was cool. And lastly, and this is how thin it was. This is 4 hours. I'm giving you like 6 bullet points. Footage of Paul Levesque telling the WWE folks that if you don't want to be on stage for this 10-bell salute and you don't want to honor Hogan, you don't have to. That to me was really nice to see. It was an acknowledgement that this guy is not just problematic, but in many ways a bad dude, and we're not going to force you to honor someone that you don't want to personally honor. And there were a lot of people who did skip that ceremony. So those were the positives I took away from it. But again, pretty thin for 4 hours of viewing.
So I thought the first episode, which was a lot of his backstory in growing up, was the most interesting to me because that was the stuff I was the least familiar with. Like I haven't read books on it, but the basic outlines of things. But him, like you said, learning wrestling and how that worked, him meeting Linda and all. I thought Linda was maybe the most interesting person they interviewed in the show because she could tell you stories that weren't captured on WWE cameras. And so I thought she was really interesting for that. And when the most surprisingly touching, I don't know if touching is the word, but emotional part was when Hogan talks about his brother and his brother overdosing on drugs after seeing Hulk, shortly before that. And it was something where like, that's where like the character and the person have become so melded that the story of young Terry Bollea is kind of forgotten and I think is interesting and important. And his father not approving of wrestling for so long and all these different things. So I think it was a good starting point because it does take you on this journey from this guy who was kind of lost as a young person to somebody who was still kind of lost at the end and always looking for that affirmation. He spent his whole life trying to get that affirmation from his parents, then from the wrestling audience for as long as he could. And when he could no longer get it from the wrestling audience, he got it from the political audience. And that, like, the whole thing, I think, it became kind of a tragic story. And I don't mean tragic in the sense of feel bad for him. I'm not saying that. But it is tragic to see somebody who came from very little, become something big, and essentially throw it all away because of his own action.
But that's precisely one of the problems I had with the documentary, which was there's a tragic story there, but it was painted in a way that he's a hero who overcame obstacles of his own creation. And in the end had one last great impact, which was severely overstated, as I will talk about momentarily. But
yes,
that's part of the reason I had a problem with it, though.
Yeah, no. Yeah, it was, the end of it is a bit too celebratory.
Yeah,
but I'm also not surprised that happened in a documentary. It's a documentary with him. He obviously authorized it. WWE's a part of it. It was only going to be so much. I was not expecting Dark Side of the Ring here.
Sure,
but I thought that was just kind of the whole thing. Is like, man, this guy really messed up and blew it, and it's all his own fault.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's the things he said about race, whether it's the political stuff, whether it's the things he did with Linda and the reasons she left him, and the battles that they had. And I think that was just kind of sad, like just that it happened. Some of the other stuff, young Linda, by the way, looks exactly like Brooke.
Yes.
It was crazy. Yeah. That was something going back.
She really does.
In terms of, I thought the Hogan versus Yokozuna, not at WrestleMania, but the one where Yoko wins as Hogan's on his way out while they're playing Broken Wings, the song over it was pretty funny.
Some of the music choices were great. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Linda Hogan also loved to talk about sex in this documentary. There's a lot of that in there. I'm just looking through some. I have some negatives here, but we'll get to those later. But I think, like you said, I did like that they showed the Triple H. Hey, you don't have to be out here for the thing if you want. And they did lean into, like, a lot of people didn't like this, and so I was worried that was just going to kind of be too positive. And in some ways it was, and we'll get into that. But glad it was at least acknowledged there. I think you kind of realized at the end too, at his funeral and stuff, not many of those 1980s guys are around anymore. Like it's DiBiase, it's Jimmy Hart, it's Ventura, and like not much else. And it's really kind of a generation of what were heroes to people at that time are really gone. I thought Werner Herzog was pretty funny in it. Yeah, as you mentioned as well. But overall, like there wasn't anything in it I necessarily would have like taken out in place of something else. I just wanted more of the stuff we didn't get.
Yeah, and many of those people who are gone that you just mentioned, gone like decades before. Not even recent. Like they just started dying. Like these people have been gone for a while.
And because of that, and because of how he acted in wrestling, like he just didn't have a lot of friends by the end. Like it was Nick, it was Jimmy Hart, and like that was kind of it. And so I'm not surprised in his desperation for affirmation that he turns to politics. And they talked about his decision to be more vocal about the politics, knowing that half the country was going to hate him again over that. And obviously you can disagree with his decision to do that, but I thought it was at least interesting that he did think about that. And I say that as somebody who has relatives who have kind of gone down that same path. So I guess I could kind of, I could feel what they were saying there.
Yeah, I'll get to that in a moment. And I did like, to a degree, what you're saying as well. So we'll cover it. Now clearly, look, there's a lot more I disliked about this docuseries than that I liked. So please, Vintage, just interrupt me if I mention anything that you want to like double down on or add your perspective.
Yeah. Is this not like because it was ignored, or not liked what they did show? Because there's a lot I didn't like that I just would have liked to be in here.
A little bit of both. A mix of stuff. So as with Mr. McMahon, that docuseries, this was not made for a hardcore wrestling audience. It was made for a general audience. And that is totally fine in theory. But it overlooked a variety of like key items and details in his career, both clarity on why stuff happened, the way it happened, certain elements that would have painted Hogan in a more poor light as a wrestler, such as how he wielded power, especially in WCW, but also WWF. They did not get at all into what he did in WCW and how it contributed to the downfall of that company.
They kind of
No,
did.
they
like
mentioned
he basically
it.
said he was told he could run the company.
Yeah, but that's it. And then they never really got back to it.
They sped through WCW like very
Sped
quick.
through it.
And that again, that's an example of where like, yes, if you're a wrestling fan and you know these things happen and they're not in there, or you see wrestling things that you know happen, like WrestleMania 3.
The point though is they did not skip positive and negative stuff equally. What they skipped in the documentary were things that painted him in a more negative light and colored the reasons why he was so disliked both inside and outside of wrestling. And that's really the larger part of what I'm going to talk about here.
Yes and no, but like you said, Ventura and Bret Hart were there to kind of say that.
Again,
now, was there enough of it? Maybe not.
Well, let me get to that. The exception to this was the WrestleMania 9 situation, which was told properly, and Hart was allowed to get everything he wanted off his chest. He called him, quote, a backstabbing, knife-wielding piece of shit. That's a top-tier line from Bret. But it was one of the few times during the documentary where there was a person actually calling him out on that. The other time was talking about steroids a little bit. That was pretty much it. And that's the problem. There were not enough voices calling him on his bullshit, even when he spouted a lot of his bullshit. They also skipped over the huge fight with Marvel over the Hulk name, even though that was important. And I believe they covered that in the Mr. McMahon documentary, which is crazy that it wasn't mentioned in the one about Hulk Hogan. They avoided it.
Well, that one is how many episodes was McMahon? 6 or 8?
I want to say 5. Like
it was definitely more.
I thought it was like 4, and then they added one because of all the Janelle Grant.
It was
stuff.
6.
It was 6. So it was 5, and they added one. That's what it was. So yeah, it was a little bit longer. Sure. They also, beyond that, pretty much sped through everything that happened with Nick and Brooke on the back half of Hogan Knows Best. His decade-long second marriage, which got no mention at all. Linda was also portrayed, surprisingly, in an entirely positive light, which is wholly ridiculous, especially considering they focused more on her affair, which wasn't even an affair, I don't think, than what Hulk did to actually end their marriage. Like, oh, yeah, he cheated once and then they got divorced. No. It was a lot more than that. And then on Hogan's side, they avoided the 1996 sexual assault allegation, among many other negative aspects, like him completely squashing the unionization attempt by WWF wrestlers. And I would assume he and Ventura were both asked about that because they were interviewed and they were key parties. They also touched on the Gawker trial, the sex tape, and the transcripts, as you mentioned, but they didn't play the audio or show the words or explain what he said, the context in which he said it, and why his blatant racism turned so many people against him, even those who were willing to overlook some of the other things he did in his career. By not painting this guy as a racist, or at least explaining that he did something that was incredibly racist, it was a whitewashing, pun not intended, of his character in that moment.
Like, they made pretty darn clear everybody hated him over that.
I'm getting, again,
Triple H explains calling Hulk Hogan to say, like,
but they don't say why. They just said he did something wrong.
I don't know about shown, but like not said, but like, it made clear.
Dude,
what he
a
said.
real, you know this, a real documentary airs the audio or shows the words on a transcript and it bleeps out the appropriateness. It gives you context. There was no context provided other than he said something that was offensive and it got leaked as part at the end of this trial. That's the way it was covered. And that's dog shit. It is. So simple as that.
Well, yes, I don't know if they, again, because the lawsuit was over showing the tape, I imagine they couldn't show the tape.
No, you play the audio or you show the transcript, though.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you on that. I wouldn't call it a whitewashing. Like, the whole thing is about how everybody hated him over. I think they should have been more detailed. Yes.
By not getting into the details, it's making it seem perhaps not like it was minor, but that it was not as major as it was. It was, I mean,
I disagree with
that. There are instances, all racism is bad. There are instances where people do things that are racially insensitive that get them quote unquote canceled. There are other instances where someone is shown to be a racist.
Well, and also
he was shown to be a racist.
Hogan says in the video that he is racist.
Right.
Like, he says.
Yes. This is my point. Okay. This is what I'm trying to explain. Now, the series after the first episode, to your point, it was running decently okay. until about 35 minutes into the second episode, when it took a turn and spent a ridiculous amount of time focused on the person in the White House for what at the moment felt like no reason whatsoever. Now, I understand it from a documentarian perspective. If you get an interview with a president or a sitting president, how do you not take advantage of that opportunity? However,
yes,
it was...
and I'll add too similarly, Barack Obama is in The Last Dance.
You're 1,000% right about that. And he did not need to be. But Barack Obama was also a Chicago native, speaking about the most famous person ever to come out of Chicago, maybe next to Oprah Winfrey or equivalent to Oprah Winfrey. So it's slightly different in that context.
In the second episode, they do a good job of having it in the context of, what is it, WrestleMania 2
They do,
or
but they
4,
spend so much time on it. They spend so much time on it unnecessarily. And it's clear that that is shown as a way to introduce that character so that it can be hit on later in the documentary. In that moment,
I had the same feeling at the time. I was like, why are we... I know it's a president, so like I understand wanting to use what you've got, but also this is way overstating.
Right. It was way overstating it. It was unnecessary in that moment. And it was way too long, too. That's the other part of it. And then we get to episode 4. Suddenly, there are almost explanations and excuses and reasons given for his political, let's not say turn, but turn to political focus, where suddenly it becomes about celebrating the guy in the White House rather than digging deeper into the end of Hogan's life. 30 minutes of a 4-ish hour Hulk Hogan docuseries, nearly 20% of it in total, was about how he was an admitted coward, quote unquote, not publicly supporting him, and how the supposed assassination attempt led to him going public with his support and being praised for it more than he was criticized, which was absolutely not the case. There was even a clip of Levesque saying at the funeral, to be fair, that Hogan got the guy in the White House elected, which, come on. The whole deal should have been a 2-minute mention at most. At the end of his life, he did this and it was controversial, blah, blah, blah. It was 20 minutes in that moment, or maybe even longer than that, 25. And then another 5 to 8 minutes in that earlier episode, all focused on that guy. Now, they did air Hogan getting booed at the Raw debut on Netflix, unedited, so I give them credit for that. But they couch that by saying, well, only about half the country disapproves of him, which again, that was not the case. Then you have Paul Levesque saying he assumed Hogan would get booed out of the building in Los Angeles. Okay, then why did you bring him out, bro?
Yes, exactly. I don't that I wanted to know more about that. Like, wait a minute, you knew he was going to get booed on your Netflix debut, so why did you guys do
that? To me is rewriting history. Like now, yes, of course it makes sense. Oh, in Los Angeles, of course he was going to get booed. In the moment, you guys were not thinking that way. I know there was the Real American Beer partnership, and WWE, don't forget, still owns a percentage of that company somehow, or whatever the case might be. Yeah. But now look, there were also a few people making excuses, and there were others who called it straight. And while Hogan tried to say he was okay with getting booed and painted it like, oh, no, it was still a positive response, Bischoff called it properly that his role in that moment was not to get booed, and therefore he can't paint it that way. It didn't work. Hogan then claimed that he got cheered in New York after that, which they did not have footage of. They had him on the street talking to one dude who said, Hulk, you were bigger for me than Bruno Sammartino. That was the context in which they said that after this booing, he got roundly cheered in New York. Again, did not happen unless they're talking about him.
I was trying to remember what that was. Like, was it a Raw or a SmackDown that happened? I could not remember.
On what? The booing?
The supposed cheering.
It didn't. No, it didn't. I'm thinking they were talking about a political rally where he got cheered, which of course he would because he was there for that one guy, right?
Oh, that would make sense.
But they didn't contextualize that.
Happen on WWE.
They didn't contextualize that. They made it sound like he got cheered in a wrestling setting. So they were lying straight. I mean, and they allowed him to lie. The last thing we hear from Hogan in the documentary, basically that, is a straight up lie, which again is a lot of what transpired there. Now, even beyond all that absurd shit, and I'll let you get back in, the whole series, it just lacked, for me, style and substance. It tries to create not only empathy for Hogan, but admiration for him fighting through obstacles that were self-inflicted. Even when he stood trial, he was portrayed as someone who did the heroic thing by telling the truth. He was not a hero. He was a complicated guy, sure. And that was explained a little bit, but you don't really get into his personality, and there was no nuance to his portrayal. I suppose the title, Hulk Hogan Real American, it gave away that this was the context in which he was going to be viewed. But you learn almost nothing about Terry Bollea outside of the first half of the first episode. And even that was focused on him already an adult, becoming a wrestler. At least in Mr. McMahon, you got stuff about his upbringing and his early life, and he exposed the way his parents treated him and stuff with, I think it was his sister or I'm forgetting I forget the McMahon one. But we learned a little bit about how McMahon's personality was shaped. They don't go into any of that with Hogan. The filmmakers, were more focused on memorializing him at the end than actually telling his story. And to me, that was a huge shame.
But I do think a lot of the theme of the final episode is that the idea of Terry Bollea is gone and has been gone for a long time. And they hit on it several times throughout every episode that like he started to become the character more and more. And by the end, there was no difference. The whole half the Gawker case was about that. It was about whether it was him or whether it was somebody else. And he tried to say he's Terry Bollea, but then it's like, all right, then you're wearing the bandana and you've got the mustache and you're talking like this. Mm-hmm. And every time he's out in public, he's the character. And he even, there's one point he says that where he's like, every time I'm out in public, I have to be Hulk Hogan for the people.
Right.
Because that's who they want to see. And I thought that was like a interesting slight insight into kind of how the mindset worked. And that clearly by the end, Triple H, I'm pretty sure even says it in the final episode, which is like, nobody could tell the difference by the end, or there wasn't a difference by the end. And I think that was, again, it was overly celebratory. And if people are to take it as literally, I can completely understand that. I viewed it partially as, again, the story of a guy who all he ever wanted was this affirmation. And by the end, that political place was, they made him feel like Hulk Hogan again, which is all he ever wanted. It's the only thing he wants, more than keeping his marriage together, more than any of more than a relationship with his daughter. Like that became the only thing he had left. And so I just found that it wasn't stated that, but that is how I viewed the theme. So like, yes, it was way more, the stuff at the end is way overstated in terms of his influence and how much that mattered. Again, that was less than 2 years ago. It wasn't like a large part of his life. It really just kind of came together at the end. But it's important, and I'm glad they spent the whole last episode on it, because for a lot of people in current and future generations, he is going to be defined by that. That is the thing that people know him for, not the wrestling stuff. And part of what WWE is doing, and somewhat part of the documentary is trying to do, is to make people not think that. And I don't think it's necessarily going to work just based on social media reactions to everything. People are always ready to, and I think that's good. Like I don't think his legacy should just be what he did.
I just want
wrestling.
I just want to clarify what you're saying here. You were glad the last episode was largely focused on that. I thought it took something.
I'm glad they spent a quarter of the project on all the bad shit he did at the end. That's what I mean.
Specifically,
you
the
mean
political
like it should have been more, or what?
Specifically, the political stuff you're talking about?
No, the political stuff, the Gawker stuff, the Linda stuff, the Hogan Knows Best stuff, all of the post wrestling career. I would have loved to see more about Hogan Knows Best. Like I liked that show back in the day. I was like in college watching it, I remember. And like that introduced him to a whole new audience, and suddenly he became a reality TV star and having to deal with tabloids in a different way that the family clearly wasn't ready for. And that's when these scandals start coming out. And that I'm glad they got into it a little bit, but because you don't have Brooke, you can only go, I think, so far on it. So it was, I was worried coming in, it was all going to be just about what he did in wrestling and then just kind of a footnote of the controversies at the end. But they did get into it. Maybe not enough, but a quarter of the project, I think, is.
I'll agree that I'll agree that they did not sugarcoat all of it. But just because they mentioned those details or subjects, let me clarify. just because they mentioned those subjects didn't mean they did any of them justice. And they didn't get into the details. They didn't get into the details of why he was such a, for some people, piece of shit. For why I think he deserved so much criticism. Why he got booed so vociferously on that Raw on Netflix. They just said there were people that didn't like him, and they chalked a lot of that up to he made a political stance that was brave. Yes, that was somehow brave for him to do. No, it wasn't brave. He was embarrassed all those other years. And then he saw an opportunity to grift once more, and that's why he did it. Let's be very clear about what happened there. So I somehow feel like they touched on more negativity with Hogan than they did with McMahon, and in that way it was positive. But I also felt like they went into greater detail with some of the McMahon negativity than they did with any of the Hogan negativity. And for me, I don't think they spent the whole documentary whitewashing him. I used that term earlier. Yeah. There were individual segments of things they brought up that they purposefully did not cover in a way, in my opinion, because they didn't want someone to leave this documentary thinking, oh, this was only a bad person or this was mostly a bad person. When by the end of his life, it was pretty clear that's probably the way he should be viewed.
Well, again, like this isn't my view, but my dad is a big fan and he loves Hogan and loved that Hogan did that for, and there are a lot of people in the country who do feel like that. And so I felt like they presented it as it is.
No, but they didn't though.
But they had the people booing him and you have the guy.
But they didn't explain why they didn't. Outside of Levesque saying, well, they were in Los Angeles. Outside of that, that would have happened.
I completely disagree.
That would have happened in almost any major city in the country. You want to do Cleveland, Ohio, anywhere else that would have happened.
He had been getting booed / not cheered in WWE for a very long time, even before the political stuff.
That's what I'm saying.
Because they would bring him out and he would just do the same thing every time out here to promote something. Do as listen to me, brother, blah blah blah, and nobody cared. Nobody cared about that for a long time.
Yeah, because he was a racist.
Even before that, the last interesting thing he did was WrestleMania 30 when he's in the ring with The Rock and Stone Cold to open the show and he mispronounces the name of the stadium. After that, they started bringing him back, promoting the WWE Network, promoting all this, and nobody cared.
No one
they
cared.
did the Snoop Dogg thing one of those years, and booing him by the end was. Yeah, I'm sure part of it was political, but a lot of it was people in wrestling and wrestling fans were just sick and tired of seeing this guy. They didn't want to see him anymore for a variety of reasons. So no, it's not just because they were in LA, Triple H, as much as he wants to say that. It was because wrestling had long moved beyond Hulk Hogan. But I thought there was a good line from David Shoemaker in this about when Hogan's kind of coming out politically or whatever toward the end. And he says, Hulk Hogan is supposed to be bigger than politics, and now he's just politics.
Yeah.
And I thought that describes a lot of people I know in my life whose lives now revolve around some political topic, and I've seen them go down that kind of internet wormhole where it becomes their whole personality, and that sucks. And that's what Hulk Hogan was to a lot of people at the end. I like that Triple H also said for many people, he never did fully atone for those mistakes, especially some of the racist things he did, which I think is true. So, and Hogan also at the end, thinking the boos in LA, thinking business again, thinking, oh, I'm a bad guy, I can come back, oh, they'll boo me. He was just so detached from reality at the end, and that was just incredibly frustrating.
Here's the point I'm making when it comes to the political stuff. Took up the vast majority of the final episode from the standpoint that it's what stood out most, from it, right? If you were writing a biography of Hogan, or not a biography, excuse me, if you were doing the eulogy of Hogan, right? Or you were building a Wikipedia article about his life, and I'm actually scrolling it because I hope what I'm about to say is true, okay? I'm going through it right now. Okay, yeah, what I'm saying is true. The lead of the Wikipedia article on Hulk Hogan, has nary a mention of politics. Zero. Okay, it's not even a part of it. You know what's mentioned at the end? The Gawker trial, the sex tape, the racial slurs, the lawsuit, reputation being tarnished, and so on and so forth. The political stuff, I don't even see a subcategory on this page. Now, it's here. I'm sure it's here. And if I scrolled, I would find it. But but it's not even mentioned. That was 20% of this documentary. And again, it's
no. The final episode is not all the political.
No, it was
all that other
15 to
stuff
20 minutes of the final episode, and it was 5 to 8 minutes of episode 2. The whole thing was 4 hours. It was about 30 minutes of a 4-hour documentary.
Yeah, you just.
That's what I'm saying.
That's less than what you just said. It was a quarter or whatever.
I said 20%. I said 20%. Was it 15%? I'm a little bit off. Okay. It's still 15%. Yeah. It's not even mentioned on the first 4 paragraphs of this guy's Wikipedia profile.
We're going in circles here on this topic. We'll move on from this part. But I viewed part of that as a storytelling device of him always chasing that affirmation that he couldn't give up. It's why he couldn't leave wrestling.
Sure,
it's
but
why
is
he
this
kept coming back? It was just the last thing.
People, let me clarify something.
Again, I'm just saying that's how I.
But people may be thinking that this is like a political thing that I'm saying here. It's not. I'm talking about the quality of the work. It was an outsized portion of this docuseries about his entire life. It was an outsized portion compared to how big of a part it played in his life and career. That's the criticism I have here. I'm not criticizing what his politics were, although that's a separate opinion that I hold. I'm criticizing here in terms of there was 10 times as much about his politics than there was, and the involvement of that person, than there was about him growing up, in which there was basically nothing. So maybe it's 100 times more. Okay.
I thought one of the other more ridiculous people in this was Jimmy Hart. Who's just always he's the same way. He's always in character and always trying to do that.
Right.
And after Hogan gets booed, Jimmy Hart said, "No, they didn't boo you." Like,
right.
So he was just always trying to do whatever he could to.
Hulk, they weren't booing you. They loved you, man.
Yeah.
Okay, Jimmy.
Yeah. So
you have ears, buddy.
He another just like old school wrestling guy to the very end. Looking through the rest here. Unrelated to any of this, I think American Made, his WCW theme, is better than Real American. It's not more iconic, but I think it's better. Am I crazy for that?
You're not crazy because people have different music tastes and it's a totally fine theme. It's not better though. I just disagree.
It gets me going a lot more. Yeah, it gets me going more than the other one does.
It's kind of like saying, and I think we've had this conversation before, America the Beautiful is better than the Star Spangled Banner or something. It's like, well, I mean, in some ways it is, but in other ways it's the effing Star Spangled Banner. Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
On Bash at the Beach 96, Kevin Nash completely lies in saying they didn't know.
Yeah, right.
They didn't know what Hogan was going to do. And didn't know who the third man was till he walked through the thing. No, that has been debunked a million times as much.
But forget about debunked. It doesn't even exist in reality. That's not even something that could possibly happen.
No.
Like,
and I know the feelings are well established here, but he had reported well before what the situation was. People knew what it was.
There's two names that are going to be blanked out on this podcast. One of them you guys are probably going to know. The other you don't, but it was a reporter that Vintage just mentioned.
There was also I never actually really thought about this, but Hogan cutting that promo after Bash at the Beach, like on the show after the turn, that would never happen now. Like, that would be saved for the next day on television and maybe be the main event of television. The fact that they did the turn and the explanation all on the end of the pay-per-view was actually kind of wild.
Well, look at John Cena. Perfect example.
Yeah. Yep.
Turned at the end of Elimination Chamber.
It's not good business, but it was like, man, they used to just give you stuff and we didn't have to wait to always actually do things. When they're doing the WrestleMania 3, he does the classic lie that he had never slammed Andre or nobody had slammed Andre.
Right.
That had been done before, just not on television.
And that he didn't know whether Andre would let him slam him. Oh.
Yes. Yeah. Nope. But I did notice in that match, they showed a 3-arm drop.
They did.
In the third
I thought about that too.
It's a great storytelling
during the bear hug.
Can we make that consistently? I think one of the biggest lies WWE tells about Hogan is that he is the one that made wrestling big or popular or national. And that is not true. Stadiums, football stadiums, baseball stadiums would be full for all kinds of different promotions. World-class championship wrestling here in Dallas was doing the Cotton Bowl all the time. so WWE always tries to say like, oh, wrestling just used to be all these backdoor, small time local things. And then WWE came in and made it national, and Hulk Hogan, and they started doing stadiums. That is an incorrect telling of pro wrestling history. And it always bothers me that WWE sticks with that.
It is.
And they did.
It is, but I do want to say,
as
because
well.
there's been a lot of conversation around Hogan and his place in wrestling. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but
No, I'm going to go into this.
he's also been. I'll just say one line. I'll let you. His role has been downplayed by
Yes.
people outside of the documentary. It was overhyped in the doc,
Absolutely.
seriously downplayed. Talking like people outside of the United States didn't know who he was. Bullshit. Okay, I'm not saying everyone in every country knew Hulk Hogan, but Hulk Hogan wrestled in Japan. Okay, they very much knew him over there. People in Mexico knew him. Many other countries, Canada certainly, many other countries. He would go over when WWE would do European tours. It wasn't quite the Dream Team 1992 reaction from people worldwide, but it was significant for that age as well. I mean, talk about rewriting history. People claiming Hogan was not massive and like a pop culture phenomenon outside of the United States as well. It was nowhere near as big. Don't get me wrong. And word did not travel and media did not travel those days like it did now. But holy shit, has that been downplayed on the back end of this doc? Please go ahead. I apologize.
Yes, which is why I was going to say in WWE it is underplayed how important Hogan was, and it is overplayed how important Vince McMahon was. I don't think Vince McMahon can do what he wanted to do without Hulk Hogan. I think he was the guy at the time.
Absolutely.
With what he had. And Vince was able to get the most out of it. But as we see, when he has sometimes tried with other people like Ultimate Warrior, and it didn't work. And it's a credit to Vince for identifying that and bringing him back and all that stuff. But the Mr. McMahon documentary was kind of like this too, where it's like, it's all about the brand of WWE and Vince and what did this. And it's no, like wrestling is still about the wrestlers.
Mhm.
And Hogan, to that point, I think deserves more credit for wrestling being what it is and less so specifically to WWE.
Yeah, I mean, he did it for WWE, he did it for WCW, and he did it for TNA. He raised the profile of 3 different companies in 3 different eras. Who else has done
also
that?
And also speaking of the TNA stuff, it's very brief in there, but him talking about being on like fentanyl like every day during that. Again, it's Hogan, so you never know what fully to believe, but like Jesus, man. So ultimately, like, no, I don't think the documentary is a complete telling of Hogan. I think, again, you could have gone 10 episodes on this. You could have gone more into the Gawker stuff. You could have gone into the Macho Man, to the Mega Powers. They didn't even go into, I thought we would get Hogan makes up with Ultimate Warrior at WrestleMania 30, and he dies the next day. And they didn't really kind of come back to that. More about his upbringing in younger part would have been cool too. But there was I liked a lot of what I believe are home videos that Linda brought to the table. I think there was a lot of that was interesting, just seeing him around the house with his kids and all that kind of stuff. Nick is there, but Nick doesn't ultimately really like kind of provide much, I think, on the show. I think the biggest thing missing really was Brooke. It's one of his 2 kids. And the fact that Hulk never got to see his grandkids. He died before they were born, but they hadn't made up, and he died. And I think that's unfortunate as well. So go into it with if you haven't watched it, with the appropriate amount of Hogan skepticism, and understand that you can never believe a single thing that comes out of his mouth. But in roll your eyes and be frustrated at the obvious parts. But I do think there is a through line of the story that tries to get to how Hulk Hogan and Terry Bollea became the same thing, and they were never able to separate. And I think about, like, Cody's in this documentary a lot.
The latter 2 episodes.
Yeah. And it made me just wonder, like, how often pro wrestlers think about that. Like, Cody's always kind of working, like in everything he does. There's always a little bit of that in there because he grew up in the business. And it just made me think, like, as someone who plays a character for most of your life, how difficult is that? And Terry Bollea was not able to contain that. And in that sense, I thought it was an interesting look in, with obviously plenty of things to be upset about and think they weren't good enough. But it was better than I thought it was, I think, going in.
So what is so you have a watch recommendation on this, and what is give me a star rating, or actually give me thumbs up, thumbs down. 2 thumbs up, 1 thumb up. Give me what you got here.
How many thumbs are we doing?
2.
Like
well,
one,
2. If we're doing Siskel and Ebert,
2 thumbs down.
If we're doing Siskel and Ebert, the range is 2 thumbs down to 2 thumbs up.
I'll give it 1 thumb up. So like the 3 out of 5. I guess
the watch
4 out of
recommendation.
5 is what we're doing there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I enjoyed it. I was not bored by it. I was not bored, brother. It made me think a lot. It frustrated me at times, but kind of like the Vince doc too. Like it's very engaging. It never really slows down. You're not like it's a pretty breezy watch, I thought, actually, for being as long as it is. And it left me wanting a lot more because I knew there was more to the story to be told.
Yeah, I'm just not on the same plane as you. I'm 1 thumb down. I don't think it was utter trash, but certainly by the time I finished it, I was like, oh, that didn't really accomplish much for me. I'm speaking for myself. And I would have a do not watch recommendation, unlike Mr. McMahon.
Really?
Where I was at 1 thumb up, I would say, and I would suggest people watch it because you do learn a lot about Vince. I didn't feel like I learned anything about him here.
Well, that's because like Vince, like we did know pretty much. We knew so much of Hogan's life because it was all out in the public. A lot of Vince had always stayed private, other than that one Playboy interview he did in like 2001 or something like that. So there was a lot more to learn about him. So yes, if there's a lot in this, you will already know. So in my grade, I'm trying not to like factor that in. I guess I would say. Were you bored by any of it?
I was pretty bored. Yeah.
Did you feel like you were having to cram this in though? Because I said we had to do it.
No, I had plenty of time to watch it. I did have plenty of time to watch it, but
I started it late at night and I was like, oh, I want to watch the next episode, but I got to go to bed.
This is the thing. If I'm watching a show, right, and the episode ends, and the next one comes up, and I'm like, oh, that to me tells me I'm not having a good time. And there's a new show also on Apple TV called Margot's Got Money Troubles, where
yes, I need to watch that.
I got through the first 2 episodes, and after episode 1 and after episode 2, I was like, oh, am I really going to keep watching this? And then episode 3 happened, and at the end I was like, oh, I'm actually really intrigued to see episode 4. And then I watched 4.
That happened to me with Succession.
In the season 1?
That was the same way. Season 1. It's like episode 5 or 6 or something like that, where the show completely changes.
Yeah.
And you're like, whoa,
now,
I actually am invested.
Yeah, I'm not in love with this show yet. And there's wrestling elements, by the way, in this show. That's why
Chris Jericho's in it.
Yeah, Chris Jericho's in it, but they also talk about like WWF. There's fake old footage. There's AEW random stuff in there. It's interesting. But the point is that this was a 4-episode doc. I got halfway through and I didn't want to keep watching it. Then after the 3rd episode, I was like, I really don't want to keep watching it. And then after the 4th, I was like, thank God there's not a 5th episode of this. So, it's a 1 thumb down. You can learn a couple things potentially if you're relatively new to wrestling or a younger fan and you want to like brush up on some of the beginnings of Hogan. But I got to tell you, there's a real good amount of Hogan stuff in the Mr. McMahon documentary, the Monday Night Wars documentary, the Mega Powers Explode documentary. Like I'd go back and watch some of those. You're not going to get as in depth about the shitty parts of his life, but you're going to learn a lot more about him as a wrestler and coming up in WWF.
I think ultimately, like Hulk Hogan is one of the most famous people in American history. Really, like everybody knows who he is, pretty much, or at least maybe not as much now, but really knew who he was, and that's just why I thought it could have gone into more, good and bad, for a lot of different reasons. But I thought it was given the I don't know, say time constraints, but given the time they give you, I thought it did a pretty good job, basically.
Okay, that is it for Vintage on this episode. Thank you, Chris, of course, for joining us. It is time to move into these full breakdowns of NXT and AEW. However, before we get to that, Silver King does have 2 things to take care of. First, of course, a reminder here at Getting Over.
I happen to love the number 5.
And I hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Please support us financially. We continue to support you with all of this performance-enhancing audio. Buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. That was the first thing I needed to take care of. The second is breaking down everything else that happened on AAA last Saturday. I told you it was an absolutely loaded show. We already covered the El Grande Americano of it all, the Mascara contra Mascara match that's forthcoming. We did all of that on Tuesday's podcast at the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Make sure you listen to that. But there were 4 more items from the AAA show that I wanted to go over. Then we will talk NXT and AEW. There are timestamps in the episode description. You can skip around if you so choose for the remainder of the show. As always, I hope you listen to the entire thing. El Hijo del Vikingo backstage learned that he would get a Latin American Championship match against El Hijo de Dr. Wagner Jr. Basically, he's stepping into the role that was set up for Santos Escobar, who was injured. He required a second surgery, and obviously he got released by WWE last week. We had Vikingo against Mini Vikingo as a match on the show. Older brother obviously dominated until Mini hit one of the most spectacular wrestling moves I have ever seen. I have been watching this shit for 3 decades. He hit a tope tornillo crucifix driver. Ridiculous. We tweeted the clip. It's all over the internet. Make sure you see it. Mini dodged his brother into an exposed middle turnbuckle, hit a 450 for a false finish. The referee subsequently got knocked out of the ring. As that happened, Mini countered with a hurricanrana into a trap pinning combination. There was no one to count. Someone rang the ring bell anyway. I don't believe that was ever explained, but that distraction allowed Vikingo to regain the upper hand with a clunky avalanche Shiranagi. Wagner stole a chair away from Vikingo, hit Wagner driver onto the weapon, giving way for Mini to deliver a 630 Phoenix splash. And when you do that, it lands as a senton for the upset victory over his brother. Omos stopped the post-match celebration. He straight up murked Mini, but when he threatened Wagner, his older brother apparently saved him with the faces standing tall to end it. I'm talking about Wagner's older brother here. Hardly an all-time match between the Vikingos, but it was not really meant to be. This was an older brother putting over his younger brother, letting him showcase his stuff, and holy shit, did Mini Vikingo put on a showcase. The 2 most spectacular moves of 2026 in one match. Strong story going in, tremendous display of athleticism during it. As far as running Wagner Vikingo, not sure if that's actually going to wind up happening. Vikingo was nursing his wrist or shoulder after the match, so that might be really bad. Super tough grade for this match because it was purposefully slow until Mini went wild. I think I have to say 4 stars A- just for those 2 moves. They were legitimately phenomenal, and the finish, the way the crowd reacted, it was like 1-2-3 Kid beating Razor Ramon back in the day. It really was. We also had Laredo Kid against Rey Fenix in a non-title match. Laredo kicked out of Adios Amigo before Phoenix landed a step-through hurricanrana ringside and a double jump moonsault inside. Laredo avoided Mexican Muscle Buster and started getting boos before hitting a destroyer, with Phoenix surprisingly kicking out at 1. He answered with a rolling cutter and then picked Laredo off the top rope for a spinning Mexican Muscle Buster to beat the champion, who has held that title for more than 500 days. Laredo had mocked Penta's Cerro Miedo during the finish. That created the opening for Phoenix to get the job done. Phoenix offered a hand after the bell as fans threw coins into the ring, basically respecting the match that they just saw. Laredo refused to shake, though. He gripped his title tight, clearly emoting that now he's scared of losing it for the first time. Now, Phoenix had a 400-day reign with this title in 2022 into 23. That came after Laredo had a record 1,200-day reign all the way from 2019 until 21. So these are actually the title's 2 best champions in the last decade, who are seemingly going to go one-on-one for the strap in a long-awaited title match. They were terrific here. You could also tell they were holding back because Phoenix was going to win and they knew they were going to rematch. I'm at another 4-star A- here. I might be slightly over. Maybe it's 3.75 B+, but both of these matches were on that border and super entertaining. Psycho Circus also got an entire video package recapping their members being picked off one by one and the continued distrust of Psycho Clown with Pagano. A confrontation was announced for next week. It's going to be really interesting to see 2 dudes with clown painted faces have a serious conversation about friendship, loyalty, and stuff like that. It does seem like someone has been framing Pagano the entire time if you want to dig into it a little bit deeper. And lastly, Catalina, she'll make her AAA debut in the ring next week. Interesting how strong she's already gotten over since debuting there. There was also a big surprise that for a future show with a WWE superstar reappearing. I'm not going to ruin it because it's already taped and stuff, but it's someone who would make sense in something with Catalina. That's the best way I can put it. So that wraps up AAA. This was one of the best episodes of this show, and there's been a number of really good episodes. But this just accomplished so much. You had the El Grande Americano confrontation, those two matches, the stuff with Psycho Circus. I mean, the show is really good. It's the fastest hour watch. And as I've said before, if you use a VPN and you set it to Albania, you don't even have to worry about commercial breaks. You just fast forward through every break. You watch that whole show in 40 minutes. It's great. Okay, let's move over to NXT. As I mentioned, we'll have AEW on the backside. Jam-packed, fun episode. It accomplished a ton. Mostly doubled down on the debut 7 days later. Despite the immense loss of talent, NXT has found a way to keep the show exciting and entertaining through what are clear growing pains that are not going to stop anytime soon. A lot to talk about here. Tony D'Angelo fought Tavian Heights in a non-title match. D'Angelo opened NXT by spearing Heights out of his shoes onto a table backstage during a photo shoot. Tony D later told Robert Stone that he may be hunted, he's still the hunter, and he wants to fight Tavian. Stone agreed. He booked it for the middle of the show. However, while D'Angelo was making his ring walk, Cam Hendricks attacked him, slammed his head into a wall, leading Stone to delay the match and move up the planned main event into the middle of the show. Heights was incensed backstage and Hendricks costing him. Miles Bourne tried to calm him down, Tavian that is, looking on the bright side, explaining that now Tavian has time to prepare. Then Stone came in and told him, hey, the match is still on, and Heights was pumped up. While Heights did have updated gear, the vibe was not that different with his, new look and really just the hair that's different. He landed a huge splash after the break, only to eat 3 German suplexes. Tavian countered a spear with a pump knee, hit a full toss belly to belly, followed by a fisherman's power slam of some kind. D'Angelo responded with forget about it for a near fall and a rope run spear, but Heights countered out of his finisher into the impressive belly to belly suplex. Hendricks, who was thrown out of the building, appeared nonetheless. Tavian and Miles combined to battle him out of the ring and into the crowd. Tony D then caught Heights distracted with dead to rights to get the win. D'Angelo offered respect for Heights after the bell, only for Will Cruz to squash them both in the corner before lifting Tony D up for a backpack cannonball into Tavian. He declared himself Mason Rook, the last name a partial flip of his real last name. Okay, lots to go over here. Hot start to the show with Tony D's form tackle. He came across like a strong champion, being willing to fight despite getting his head literally smashed into a wall later. Probably should have been selling that a bit more, at least walking to the ring, if not during the match. So that for me was a miss. Heights continues to have energy and personality for days, and in the ring, this was probably his best match since those first few when he returned from Japan. So it does seem like the arrow is pointing up for him. What I cannot understand is the insertion of Hendricks here in a main event storyline that does not need him and puts him way over his skis. He is not ready for this, especially when you already have Tavian Heights here. You have Mason Rook involved. Like, why is Cam Hendricks, a guy who barely won LFG and is not impressed on Evolve, in the main event men's storyline for NXT? I don't get that at all. Rook pouncing at the end was fun. He looked even better than his debut. The name is fine. To me, it sounds more American than British. NXT now has about half the chess set on its roster with Rook and King. And if you add the Queen Charlotte Flair, you're a bishop and, a pawn, I guess, away from a full set. And Rook and Knight are the same thing, but there's obviously Knights in WWE as well. Credit to the crowd for doing the he's big, he's bad, he'll body slam your dad chant at the end. They knew the assignment. Crew's new name, Rook, it doesn't work as well with the chant. It's now 3 syllables instead of 2. I definitely have high hopes for this guy. Him being larger with a skull bully visual, it's going to be a great juxtaposition to the rest of the men's roster. That said, with the WWE Performance Center, he should be able to solidify himself a bit. I'm not suggesting he needs to fully change his body type or anything like that, but he's a heavy guy. And if he was to replace 25% of that fat with muscle, he'd be a monster at 6'4", only 29 years old. Not sure about the haircut, the lack of facial hair. He needs to figure that part out as well. He kind of looks like a person who would drive a Subaru, if you catch my drift. And I say that respectfully, just to be helpful. Still, out of all the men moving into the brand, he may make the quickest rise, and he's definitely had the biggest impact to date. Evil got a promo package saying he's made his name in Japan, defeating many great competitors, winning many titles. However, the soul of a warrior is never satisfied, and he sees this new era of NXT as his moment to strike. He called out D'Angelo, claiming the NXT title is the next prize he wants, and the items he presented to D'Angelo, he said, are not gifts, they're proclamations that they will one day battle for the championship. I liked it when it was just the box, but giving Tony D a t-shirt that says battle on it is so random. Maybe a sign or, I don't know, just like it's merchandise, right? It seemed so weird to me that he gave him a t-shirt last week. Anyway, he revealed his name as Naraku, which translates to hell or the abyss, a deep pit type of deal in English. Perfectly fine name, good name even. Nothing wrong with it at all. I found myself hoping they would call him Vile. It made a lot of sense. And part of what made Evil so cool is how his name worked as a pun or a reference with simple catchphrases. He did his finisher. Everything is evil. And I know that was just what commentary did, but it worked so well. He's so vile, like the similar type of idea. Instead, it's Naraku, which is not bad. It's a solid name, presumably something he chose himself. But again, it's just, I wanted the aesthetic to be the same. The way that commentary approached him and called out his moves, it would have been nice if it was similar. It's not going to be. It's been a few years since I've regularly watched New Japan, but it is crazy how this simple package had so much more production value than most, if not all, of what he had done over there. Funny that his name in New Japan was English, but his name in NXT is Japanese. Zarya received a mix of cheers and boos with, I believe, an updated logo and certainly an adjusted look. Before she entered, there was a full NXT Originals package on Rhea Ripley, which was clearly purposeful from like a timing standpoint. Zarya said NXT feels different. There's a change in the air. And for the first time, there's no one holding her back. She has a clear path to the North American Championship. And I'm like, girl, why are you not going after the main strap? Well, Zarya explained that. She said the title has taunted her for so long. It's been the source of so much angst and pain. It makes her feel like she's not worthy and therefore she wants it. Tatum Paxley interrupted, saying she understood Zarya's pain, but it has nothing to do with her. She said Zarya could scorch the earth all she wants coming at her, but considering everything that she's accomplished and all the pain that she's put other people through, she's not letting go of the title. And I'm like, you know what? Great back and forth segment. We're good. Let's move on. Except Lizzie Rain surprisingly interrupted both of them, saying she may be new, but she wants to join the party and become the latest icon to hold the title. Okay, I can deal with that. And then Nikita Lyons, who literally lost to Lizzie last week. Lots of alliteration there. She came out and kind of ruined everything, inserting herself into the situation. She called herself Nikita Multimedia, like she was Chanel West Coast or some shit. All four of them brawled, but it was Zarya who landed the F5 on Paxley to end the segment and hold the title high. Again, perfect segment until Lyons got injected. It seems to be more about getting revenge on Rain, but still, she was such an odd woman out in this situation, considering she's wholly undeserving of a push. And that's despite my respect for Nikita improving in the ring and seriously trimming down to take it easier on her knees. She deserves this second chance in NXT based on that, but this feels like way too much too soon. As for what mattered, I've said this a couple of months now, but Zarya is a severely underrated promo. She commands the ring, and you can't help but believe what she is saying. NXT aired that Ripley package beforehand. You could not help but notice the similarities besides the accent. Paxley was not at her best here, but she was hardly the focus, and her promo was sound logically. Rain getting an opportunity to quickly stand alongside top talent like this shows how much NXT believes in her, and for good reason. Her debut last week was great. I might have put her in another match this week before this segment to kind of pay off fans who might have seen her online but didn't watch her wrestle and tuned in this week to see that. That's really my only significant note. Later backstage, Stone told Zarya that she could only get her hands on Paxley in a tag team match next week. Zarya was furious at that. She's clearly more than done with partners in tag team wrestling. Stone said if she wanted a title match, that's what she had to do first. You know what? Fair play. I had the same initial reaction as Zarya. I presume Zarya either gets the fall on Tatum or the match falls apart, creating a four-way scenario. Plus, with so much time before the next NXT PLE, there's no real rush to set the bout. We had Lola Vice and Mr. Iguana against Izzy Dame and Nico Vance in a non-title match. There was a major
That's the most action I've had all year.
moment during this match when a camera was shooting Lola from behind as she excitingly jumped up and down on the ring apron, trying to get the hot tag. The faces combined for stereo hip attacks before Vice landed a huge roundhouse kick on Dame. Vance grabbed the referee's arm to prevent the count, but the faces got them in simultaneous triangle chokes. Vance and Iguana fell over the ropes, with the former bombing the ladder into the mat. Lola got distracted, allowing Izzy to avoid the spinning back fist and hit a running knee for the upset. While they beat the champions here, I don't believe the idea is for them to challenge for the titles in AAA. Rather, this was a means of Izzy getting a fall over Lola to create a reason for her to become number one contender. And fair play to that, because she otherwise doesn't deserve it. Nico looked improved in this match. He's not been given any real opportunity to share his personality. Apparently, he won Booker T's Reality of Wrestling title last weekend, so it looks like he's going to get some more work and experience. Lola and Iguana are always fun together. Izzy continues to work well in the ring. Her lone issue remains the promo, but that was not a hiccup for her here because she didn't speak. The right side won. Perfectly fine TV match. Kalani Jordan was a total bitch to Lola after the match backstage, talking shit for no reason, as is tradition. She told Vice to be more worried about her than Dame, reminding that she's the only one to tap her out. Kendall Gray came through, wanting revenge on Lonnie for hurting Ren Sinclair, so Jordan said she was prioritizing the wrong title. Lonnie's character and such, it is so frustrating, man. She's ridiculously talented and athletic in the ring. It is tough to believe a word she's saying unless she's a goody two-shoes. I'm glad she's getting the opportunity to do heel work, but there just continues to be something missing for her. Conviction, belief, stuff like that. Jada Parker fought Kylie Armstrong. Surprising amount of intensity immediately at the bell. Armstrong hit an impressive springboard crossbody deep into the ring before delivering an exceedingly strange knee drop. She mocked Parker's emote, but quickly got taken out before eating the teardrop. Armstrong ultimately raked the eyes, hit a slow-moving power slam, and finished Parker with Cali connection. I did not like Jada losing in this spot. I was confused about what NXT is doing with her at this juncture. Maybe they're going to run a full heel turn or something. I said it last week that this was a lose-lose match because Cali just debuted and Jada shouldn't be taking more L's. I still believe Armstrong could have gotten caught and just lost, but I guess we'll need to see the way it plays out. That was my mindset at the end of the segment. I'm waiting to see Parker finally take a step closer to the title. And as I've said before, Cali needs to ditch that shoulder tackle finisher. It sucks. It's not her fault. She's not the trainer coming up with the moves. Use your size, use your strength. Don't make the same mistake that you made with Trick Williams, which has somehow permeated to the main roster. He's using the trick shot. It looks absolutely ridiculous. Jada threw a fit later backstage in the locker room, tossing shit around, yelling at herself for not being able to do anything right. When she finally calmed down and sat down, Natty came in saying she heard Parker has gotten soft, and it looks like that's true. Something that remains great about NXT is that it regularly answers questions we ask ourselves after segments either before an episode is over or the following week. In this case, as I said seconds ago, it was fair to wonder why Jada lost another match and what that means for her. The answer seems to be Parker being toughened up by Natty one way or another. It was nice to see Natty too, though it was hysterical that she was walking around in full gear backstage. She makes way more sense in NXT than the main roster in 2026. Interesting to see how she gets used. Hank and Tank fought Osiris Griffin and Cutler James. It looks stupid having the rest of Dark State in normal gear with Cutler in an amateur wrestling singlet. As Dark State had the upper hand early, Deion Lennox and Saquon Sugars again argued about introducing a steel chair to the point that their partners had to physically separate them on either side of the announce table like they were, siblings fighting. Hank got a hot tag, including a pounce of Osiris into the announce table. Then he decleated Cutler before a strange double spear or shoulder tackle or something. James answered with a cool around-the-waist backbreaker, with Griffin hitting a Vader bomb chaser. Dark State followed with a strange tandem DDT that didn't really work, but the effort was appreciated. The heels caught Hank flying on a tope suicida with a double slam into Tank. They added a tandem toss spin powerbomb for the clean win. Substantial victory considering Hank and Tank were one of a few established teams in the division. Griffin and James, they leave a ton to be desired. It was probably their best work to this point. Hank and Tank, for me, they've always been and always will be non-starters. I could see them getting a main roster call-up due to their personality, but it does not work for me at all. It's the right direction for the faction, though. Having Dark State win, it continues to create angst between Lennox and Sugars on the back end, and we should continue seeing that develop. Jasper Troy fought Jackson Drake. Really nice flying Meteora from Drake at the bell, followed by a counter tornado DDT off Troy attempting his finisher. Jasper surprised by kipping up. And it was in this moment I realized, man, Jasper looks good. He looked like he had lost, 20 pounds or so over the last couple of weeks. Good for him. Moved around so much better. He chokeslammed Jackson, then tried it but failed to press slam Brad Baylor over the top rope from ringside. Okay, he's leaner. You got to get stronger, but you can't botch that. With the referee distracted, Micah Lockwood jumped over the barricade, body slammed Troy like he was absolutely nothing, got a huge pop, threw him back in the ring, and Drake, hit a 450 to win the match. Drake was once again the star. The dude has everything to be a blue chip prospect. He badly needs to add size and strength. That's literally all he requires to be the entire package. This may have been Troy's best match in NXT to date, given his opponent, and beyond moving better, he was executing moves a bit crisper too. Lockwood was super impressive, and I realized as she had Troy in the air how perfect the pairing she is for these guys. Whether they play into the dating aspect or not, she is the exact type of muscle 3 douchebags need, and the exact type of character who can become a massive babyface when she stands up for herself with all of them like months or maybe even a year down the line. The pairing is going to allow her to work on her most substantial weakness, character, and it's mutually beneficial. It could help her move up the board quickly. There will be obvious comparisons to China since Micah is so big, strong, and in this case wore black leather. And you know what? Fair enough. She's not the same character, but I get it. The match and everything that developed here, it was just so much better than I thought it was going to be when the opening bell rang. Romeo Moreno, who was apparently someone in Evolve and a returning Noam Dar backstage, confronted Vanity Project, the latter challenging Drake to a singles match. Lockwood came in to threaten him, but they agreed to fight. The Moreno aspect of this was totally random. No idea who he is, why he was there. I can't imagine he's called up. Great to see Noam back healthy after his awful injury. I'm glad WWE still sees value in him as a veteran on the brand. He's super talented. Tristan Angels got a debut video package. He said he's aiming to bring real class to NXT. Despite being born a 7th-generation sheep farmer, he said he's always destined for more. Angels said that he has a 6th sense for winning and achievements, while Miles Bourne doesn't have all 5 of his. Great line. He tore down a number of NXT babyfaces, saying he's the star NXT has been yearning to see. He also called himself Mr. England. This was excellent. You could have dropped this in 1995-96 WWE. It would not have felt out of place. If his in-ring matches the look, promo, and the character work, he could go a long way fast. I could see him as a North American champion before the year is out. No wonder he got a call in 7 months. I said it last week. He's a mix of Hunter Hearst Helmsley, Shawn Michaels. I think I said William Regal before, but this week, there's a little bit of Christian back from the Brood days here as well. Shiloh Hill shared a social media video of him celebrating his win over Ricky Saints last week. He responded to Angels calling him out, saying that he was basically going to do some deep research on the guy. Then he pulled the audience for insults about male models or sheep herders, so that way he could use the insults against the guy. Another week headed in the right direction with Shiloh. There was more of a chaos element in this promo than some of his more recent ones, but he was still grounded and normal as opposed to his original manic character. Sourcing joke insults and trying to learn someone's allergies is quite funny. New NXT broadcaster Emily Agard from the school of Renee Paquette and Jackie Redmond in Canada. She was on assignment interviewing Keanu Carver outside the WWE Performance Center. Carver was a total dick right off the jump, rejecting the concept of talking in front of a camera despite, being a professional wrestler on television. So they put the camera on the ground as Agard ran down his Temple career and asked what motivates him. Keanu said it's all about getting paid and feeding his family, doing interviews and whatever online fans have to say. That doesn't take care of that stuff. He doesn't need clout or clicks or popularity. He just needs a chance, or WWE can go ahead and cut him, because if wrestling doesn't work, he's got to find something that will. Carver said he's been the same guy his whole life. He's not there to follow rules or listen to authority, and if NXT doesn't accept it, he'll go his own way. Then he accepted that they were recording the entire time, knowing that the camera was on while it was on the ground, and he allowed her to ask one real question. And she asked, appropriately, how the hell did you know the kanji battle symbol that Naraku put on the box and on the t-shirt?
Thank you.
Great question. He said he went to college, and while he wasn't always in class, he may not brag about it, but he's, quote, smart as shit for real. LOL. Okay, this gets an A for effort. Let's say a B for execution. There's no doubt that Carver is real, so him repeating that remains unnecessary. We know you're real, dog. Okay, move on. Speaking of repeating, he does that a lot. This segment could have been 1/3 shorter if he just said stuff once. Despite this being an extended segment, we didn't learn that much, as we heard versions of all of this before, outside of the deal about him paying attention in class. And look, if he was so smart, he'd probably be handling himself better with his bosses. The issue with Carver is not his believability, it's his wrestling skill. That's it. He's not there yet. The character can develop. The in-ring can improve. But if you're rushed onto TV before you're ready, that's going to be detrimental. WWE clearly believes in him. and he does seem to be getting groomed for the NXT title. But I mean, he's probably a year, 18 months away from being ready for that. And it feels like he's going to have it in 6 months. I just don't understand what they're doing. Fit Finlay visited Birthright backstage with William Regal on the phone, criticizing them for getting outmaneuvered in recent weeks. Regal informed that Charlie Dempsey is back training in England while they have a 6-man tag team match next week. It confuses me what WWE and NXT are doing with Dempsey. It's literally a snip, snap situation. He's seemingly never around long enough to actually achieve anything, including simply building a character. Considering Birthright has been a bunch of straight up losers since they formed, a righting of the ship from Finlay, and Regal, that was necessary, but we got to see if anything comes of it, because right now it's just really weird. So that wraps up NXT this week. As I mentioned, it was a really entertaining episode. It accomplished a lot. At the end of the day, they're in this developmental period, which is appropriate because it's a developmental brand. But it's almost like NXT 3.0, 4.0, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot that's being formed, a lot that's, trying to be figured out. You're seeing it happen on TV. And in that way, it's almost not, I don't want to say more interesting, but it's interesting in a different way, because for the first time in a long time, we're actually seeing like a true developmental show. For the first time, really since NXT 2.0, you're seeing a lot more developmental talent than established talent waiting for their opportunity to go to the main roster. So that wraps up NXT this week. Let's move over to AEW. 5 of 16 matches were storyline relevant, 31%, which is just pitiful. Collision last week went 0 for 7, so the 3-hour Dynamite was 5 for 9, but even some of those were thin. It was the worst week of TV, top to bottom, in a long time. Usually, I find at least 2 or 3 segments or bookings to praise. Thinking back before I go segment by segment, I don't believe there's one this week. Seriously. Now, Dynamite opened with a tribute to Ted Turner, and it was led appropriately by Tony Schiavone. There's a surprising amount to go over here, so let me start with the positives before moving on to the parts that ranged from eye-rolling to maddening. Sting came out wearing face paint for the second time in 3 weeks. He said he was retiring the face paint, by the way, but he spoke nicely about Turner. They also did a 10-bell salute with a light thank you Ted chant from the crowd at the end. It was a classy gesture by AEW to spend the first 8 minutes of the show on Turner. The problem is that by the time it was over, it felt kind of self-serving. And while I wish I could tell you my perspective on this was because I'm a curmudgeon or something like that, it's not, and I'm not. I'm not sure how anyone could have watched this segment and not come away shaking their head a bit. The most prevalent issue was how AEW transparently used Turner's death to try and co-opt the legacy of WCW as its own, while likening Turner to Tony Khan, who could not be more dissimilar from the guy, other than owning a wrestling company that operates on his network and it rivals WWE. Exacerbating this issue, perhaps purposefully, is that the letters WCW were never stated, even though they definitely could have been. AEW has said WWE, WrestleMania. They've said WWE character names on air before. So every time Schiavone said we, he made it sound like AEW had some extended legacy that it did not. If he said WCW in some of these cases, it would have worked better. So the question is, did they do that purposefully to conflate the legacy? Or did they just not want to say WCW for some weird reason? In the introduction of the segment, Schiavone literally said, quote, "We still survive today," unquote. And he said that was through the foundation Turner built, Khan's leadership, and Warner Brothers Discovery. Wrestling still survives. No, dude, wrestling survives because WWE is massively popular. AEW is not on TBS because of Ted Turner, which Schiavone also said. AEW exists because Khan, in the one way he is like Turner, decided to throw hundreds of millions of dollars at creating a company because he loves professional wrestling. And more power to him for doing that. The industry is better because Tony Khan created AEW. Schiavone then said the Darby Allin versus Kevin Knight match was being held in memory of Turner, which, no, it wasn't. If they wanted the guys to come out and say they were dedicating their match to him, cool. But they didn't say that. That's not what happened. And then Sting filleted Khan as an all-in billionaire, just like Turner, and said, "Thank you, Tony," at the end of a memorial for Ted Turner. This was a crowd chant away from making me vomit. Schiavone then explained the TNT and TBS belts and how images on them refer back to the old TBS building, which is 100% true. But he said it was to honor, quote, our past. No, it's not your past. It's not AEW's past. In no way, shape, or form is it your past. This should have been 4 to 5 minutes honoring Turner and his place in wrestling history. Instead, it was 8 minutes of trying to praise Turner while simultaneously claiming that AEW is the modern WCW, not just picking up its legacy, but being a continuation of it. I saw people praising this up and down, the standard folk. And yes, again, very classy of AEW to spend so much time honoring Turner, no doubt about that. But I could not believe how little criticism I saw of the way this was spoken and how it was framed. Perhaps it shouldn't be that surprising, considering Khan has only sent one recent tweet about Ted Turner. And this is what he wrote about him a few years ago. Quote, I've never met Ted Turner. It's very possible Ted Turner is smarter than me, but he didn't know 1% of what I know about professional wrestling, or WCW would still be on TNT and TBS. AEW is here to stay. Watch AEW Rampage live tonight. Unquote. First of all, it's not possible that he's smarter than you. Ted Turner accomplished 100 times what Tony Khan has in his life. Second, hysterical to say that AEW is going to stay here. It's here to stay. And then promote a show that literally got canceled on TNT. Even beyond what happened on Dynamite. Does that tweet and then what they did on the show not crystallize like the hidden purpose of all of this? If certain people in wrestling media sphere were not obsessed with glazing Khan and AEW at every instance, this would be called out by them as at least 50% of a charade that it seemed to be on Wednesday. But of course, it won't be, and that falls to us. Let's go ahead and break down everything that happened on AEW TV this week. On Collision, the TNT Championship was on the line. Kevin Knight successfully defended over Hook in a 12-minute main event. Hook did nothing to deserve the title match, of course. There was no build for the match other than the ops last week saying that he would try to win the title back. Hook got beaten clean, which was necessary considering Knight already had an AEW title match on the other side. But still, Hook was supposed to be this faction leader recruiting new members, so he brings in one guy in a horrendously built and inconsistent storyline, loses his match, doesn't appear on the next Dynamite, and then we're told he's shooting a movie. On Dynamite, the International Championship was on the line. Kazuchika Okada needed 10 minutes to beat Brian Keith, who got a title match, not an eliminator match, a title match for no reason whatsoever. Keith has not won any match in AEW in 12 months. He's lost 7 straight singles matches. The last win was on Rampage over Rocky Romero in 2024. His singles win before that was over Jackson Drake, who is now WWE ID, Evolve, and on NXT. This is the height of absurdity. After the bell, Okada said he wants more than the international title. He wants the AEW championship. So Okada, who has not given a shit about the AEW title this entire time with the company, he beats Keith and then wants to challenge Darby Allin because why? The answer is because AEW is trying to speedrun title defenses to Allen's reign. That way it looks good before he drops the strap back to MJF with the quickness. Insulting booking, Okada came out and challenged Darby to the match later in the 3rd hour of Dynamite on Wednesday. But preceding that, you had the AEW title on the line, Darby against Knight. This was the main event of the first 2 hours. Knight cut a promo earlier in the evening where he said nothing while Mike Bailey filleted him. Knight's head bounced off the announce table on Allen's carefree tope suicida. Allen then ate a hurricanrana off the ropes outside. Knight did an impressive springboard version of Braun Breaker's announce table clothesline while they were outside the ring for what must have been 3 to 4 minutes with no count by the referee. Again, referee's discretion is fine. Being outside that long was a little bit silly. Knight blocked a coffin drop with his knees, hit a tremendous coast-to-coast hanging dropkick before selling a knee injury. Then he hit the UFO, but sold the knee for a delayed finish. He just decided to sell the knee whenever it was convenient rather than the entire match. Darby randomly caught him in a guillotine, then a hanging coffin drop and a regular coffin drop to retain the title. Easily the AEW match of the week. I'm at 4 stars, A-. That might be a little bit generous by a quarter star, just considering how impossible it was to buy his knee injury, total inability to sell properly. Commentary called this match a classic. It was not. Sting came out after the bell to celebrate. Now, YouTube TV did not record the 3rd hour of this show, and it was not uploaded to HBO Max, neither of the episodes or no part of the 3 hours. So I literally had to go searching for this before taping the show. MJF came out after the match saying everyone is done with Darby's cute title reign, but it's time for him to get his rematch. Allen reiterated that MJF would need to put something on the line in order to get the opportunity. MJF offered his scarf, and then the Dynamite Diamond ring. Both were declined. So I'm thinking, well, Darby wants his career, or he wants to give MJF the same stipulation MJF gave Hangman Page, that he can't challenge for the title again if he loses, which, genius, right? Great booking, parallel stuff. Maybe Hangman costs it to him. Maybe they have to mutually agree to rescind the stipulation. There's so many ways they could have gone. I'm like, this is going to be really good. But no, so MJF offers $1 million. Darby declines that too, because I guess he used to be poor, so now he doesn't want money. Instead, Darby said he wants what MJF holds most dear in his life. His hair. His effing hair.
So dumb.
Darby called him a vain piece of shit. MJF demanded he be reasonable. Darby said it was a one-time offer and he'd have to sign the contract on TV next week. MJF was perplexed by this, worried about it, dropped the mic and left without confirming. All-time dumb stuff right here. It costs, what? Mid-5 figures to get the hair treatment done in Turkey? Maybe less. The hair is permanently on his head though, right? It can be cut, shaved, it still grows back. That's the whole point of doing a hair transplant. The follicles are in the skull. Why would MJF value that more than $1 million? I get that MJF is vain, but the hair grows back. It's not like the stipulation is that he needs to stay bald. And why is MJF's hair a plot point at all? Is this going to be done for the remainder of his career where everyone mentions his hair? I don't know, man. This left a lot to be desired. Pac, in a pre-taped promo done at an undisclosed time, challenged Darby to a title match because they have a history against one another. Pac lost to Darby in January. He's lost 4 of his last 5 singles matches. But sure, go challenge for the main title, bro. So now Darby has 2 more AEW title challengers for no reason whatsoever. None of them have been earned. On Collision, Death Riders and the Dogs beat the Rascals in Top Flight in a 10-man that happened for no reason and didn't even make much sense in terms of combinations. It was hot to start the show, though, from a wrestling standpoint, arguably the match of the night. On Collision, Ace Austin and Juice Robinson then beat the remaining Death Riders of Daniel Garcia and Wheeler Yuta in another random match. Yuta did a full Crimson Mask for no discernible reason in a regulation low-card match on a B show. Death Riders attacked after the bell, so the Guns both saved, with Colton returning from injury. Another all-black clothed faction back together. Can't wait. On Dynamite, Jon Moxley beat Juice in the show opener. This got relevancy credit simply due to what happened on Collision, but again, it came out of nowhere, so how relevant was it really? Mox won with a bulldog choke and nothing happened after the match. On Dynamite, footage supposedly from earlier Wednesday showed one of Will Ospreay's training sessions with the Riders. Daniel Garcia led the promo for some reason, explaining how Ospreay just got off a flight having won a title in Japan. Mox was being tapped lightly in the stomach by Marina Shafir as Wheeler Yuta did sit-ups while on Ospreay's back, strengthening his neck. Mox got into some word salad about death ground before saying they need to get Will's neck and mind right if he wants to be more than a poser and gain the last 1% he needs to be great. Nothing different from last week, still illogical and unexplained why Mox is helping him. Quote, from trying to end the man's career to trying to mold him into the best wrestling has ever seen, unquote. That was literally said by commentary when it was over. Again, why? Why is Mox trying to mold him into the best wrestling has ever seen immediately after trying to break his neck? Purely out of respect because he held up in a fight? Why isn't Mox focused on the AEW championship when he reigned over the company for so long? What's happening with the Continental Championship around his waist? Why are there not challengers being developed for that title? Ospreay went after it. Now he doesn't care about it anymore. Beyond all of that nonsense is that Ospreay did indeed win a trios title in New Japan over the weekend. You'll remember last week he told Mox he was not cleared by medical, yet they not only decided to train, but in the same breath, he said he was going to go to Japan to fight with his friends. And not only did he do that, he won. So he competed for a secondary promotion while not cleared by his main promotion. Why does he need Mox's training if he's able to go across the world and win a title with ease? Later in the show, Ospreay was told that he would be cleared if his next MRI comes back clean, despite the fact that he already went to Japan and competed. Ospreay clarified that he's not a writer and he never will be. He's doing what he has to do. Why do you have to do this? Why do you feel like you need the help of the writers to become this guy? Still not explained. Someone make this make sense. Please, for the love of God.
No, don't like that.
On Dynamite, the Ops, oh my God, cut a promo into the camera with Anthony Bowens not wearing a faction shirt despite everyone else having one. Samoa Joe reiterated that he doesn't want to tell Ospreay how to think like the writers do. He wants to give him strength in numbers so he can remain champion for a long time after he wins the title. Joe said a bunch of platitudes about the rest of the Ops before telling Ospreay his intentions were as clear as day, but if he didn't accept, they would fight. Like Mox, Joe has not provided any reasoning as to why he wants to help Ospreay. This guy was AEW champion in the last handful of months. Why does he not want the title back? Why does he want Ospreay to not only win it, but have a long reign? How does any of this make sense? These aren't even baby faces wanting to help the guy. They're all heels, and Ospreay is a total baby face.
I hate this. I hate this crap. Stop. Stop with the crap.
On Dynamite, the Young Bucks and Bang Bang Gang beat Death Riders and the Dogs in the show's final match. I didn't give it relevancy credit because all these sides continue to get run, but there's absolutely nothing to their alignments. The matches are random. The pairings don't make sense, but if you wanted to give this one relevancy credit, you could. You could give them 6 out of 16 instead of 5 out of 16. On Dynamite, Andrade El Idolo got a video package that was well produced but accomplished nothing. Andrade, by the way, won, I believe, the IWGP global title in Japan over the weekend, but that was not part of the package. There's now 4 or 5 AEW wrestlers holding New Japan titles. Obviously, none in the other direction. Sounds a bit like NXT and TNA, huh? Except they never held that many titles at once. And of course, TNA is the number 3 promotion in the United States, while New Japan is the number 1 promotion in Japan. Andrade later stood with the title in a backstage segment between Okada and Konosuke Takeshita. He said, "How you know" twice, and literally that's it. This is so frustrating. Swerve Strickland later cut a promo reminding that he was after real power so he could create more fear and more control. He said this 4 or 5 times. I want real power. He did not explain why he was targeting Bandito. 2 opportunities, both accomplished nothing. Even later, Bandito said he's the most wanted and he's easy to find. Brody King then threatened Swerve over messing with Bandito. Similarly, this accomplished nothing. Why can AEW not create a simple storyline, a backstory, anything?
So dumb.
On Collision, Hikaru Shida, backstage after Dynamite last week, said she didn't blame Chris Statlander for their tag team loss, so Stat shoved her up against the wall, put her forearm over her throat, and then put her hand over Shida's mouth, blaming her for costing her everything. Shida, who had been an asshole for weeks, apologized and said she'd make it up to her. This was awful. Shida later told Stat that she got them a tag team match against Mina Shirakawa and Harley Cameron, the latter of whom was sarcastic about them even being on the level to fight. Harley was supposed to be moving her own way separate from Willow. Remember when they split? Yet now she's in another babyface tag team, still wearing her old team's t-shirt in segments, which is really odd. On Collision, Divine Dominion cut a promo saying 2 former singles champions crumbled at their feet, so no other women in the company have a prayer of beating them unless the gods strike them down. Lena Cross is a far better promo than Megan Bayne, but this was nothing when there's basically no teams other than Brawling Birds to challenge them. That's definitely being saved for All in London, and Brawling Birds right now are fighting singles matches despite being a recently established tag team. Meanwhile, you have Shida and, Stat, who are like the next best team to challenge for the titles, I guess, but they already lost to the champions. So why are they still together? What are they doing? And then on Dynamite, Harley was still depressed backstage. So Mina said she needs to refocus so they could win their match. She told her to stop looking out there, but look in here. And she hit like the heart on her body. And then she tore apart Cameron's shirt, leaving Harley in a bra with a ton of cleavage. And that's all she needed, apparently, to get back into the zone. Look, as a straight guy, that visual was fantastic, okay? Harley is beautiful. She always looks great.
I was up all night.
But holy shit, was that like an Attitude Era women's segment where it took Harley exposing her breasts and a woman ripping off her top without prompting to be herself again? Like, super strange. The other company would have gotten crucified for doing something like that in NXT, let alone the main roster. On Dynamite, Shida and Stat beat Harley and Mina. Stat missed a boot as Cameron was attempting her finisher. Then she watched as Shida beat her with a Falcon Arrow. While Hikaru was happy, Chris remained relatively emotionless. I hope there's some payoff for this. On Collision, Orange Cassidy, Kyle O'Reilly, and Roderick Strong beat MXMTV in a non-title match that went 5 minutes. I'm not going to get too worked up over this because it was a comedy match, okay? But not only did it happen without reason, there was arguably the worst spot of the entire year here. Strong put Cassidy on his shoulders. They both ducked a running clothesline for Mace, which sounds impossible. Then he flew outside on his own accord. Then they tried to do a choke slam of Mansoor. But they just nudged him off the ring apron without even a forceful shove into Mace. Neither fun nor funny. Tommaso Ciampa stared them down after the bell to again, I thought, give away the expected singles result for Dynamite in the Double Jeopardy match. Except on Dynamite, Orange beat Dax Harwood in the Double Jeopardy title shot match. So color me surprised. I was wrong on that outcome, perhaps because I was using logic where they introduced Ciampa as the third in the trio, only to run a tag team match where he's not going to get involved. Everyone from both sides was ringside, including the Young Bucks, who are not involved in the double or nothing situation. Orange won with a trap pinning combination, meaning the side with a title match has to defend the titles first, while the side without a title match doesn't have a set of challengers. Again, it's tough to make sense of that from a booking decision standpoint. The heels attacked after the bell with the faces saving and beating up Trent Beretta and Rocky Romero. On Dynamite, Chris Jericho said he's effing furious, quote unquote, with Ricochet. The time for talking is over, and it's time for them to fight. You have already fought twice. So what are you talking about? The demand comes out with Ricochet cutting a horrible promo, total backslide from his recent improvement on the mic over the last year. Not a word he said was believable. Ricochet then challenged Jericho, who's an individual, to a Stadium Stampede match, which got zero pop or reaction from the crowd. You know why? Because it's a faction-style stipulation being used for a mid-card at best feud involving 3 dudes on one side and 1 dude on another side. Now, Jericho did well getting the crowd to cheer for the stipulation and kind of popped him with the mic after calling him bald again. Then the 55-year-old cleared the ring of all 3 guys until he took 45 seconds trying to do a lion salt, got caught with a punch, and got beat down. Hurt Syndicate, who already lost the trios match with Jericho, saved. So they returned with absolutely zero direction to TV. The average age of this team so far is 51.3 years. Seriously. For a Stadium Stampede match being booked for no reason whatsoever. On Collision, Willow Nightingale retained the TBS title over returning Anna Jay, her 3rd straight defense over someone who did not earn the match, but got a title opportunity just by returning to work. The first 2 have not been seen again since. At least Willow won with her finisher this time. On Dynamite, Willow said it's a privilege to be TBS champion, proud of herself for having 9 title defenses, mostly against random opponents. She talked about defending Turner's legacy weekly, which again, what? On Collision, Sky Blue beat a jobber in 2 minutes for no reason. Why was that even on TV? On Dynamite, Hater beat Blue. I gave this relevancy credit. Now we know why Sky got a random worthless match, because she was going to have another singles bout that she was going to lose. On Collision, the national championship was on the line. Jack Perry retained over Mascara Dorada. I did not expect the title to change hands, but I also knew the CMLL guy would never take it. There was a bus ride vignette with Perry talking on the speaker to absolutely no one. He said, quote, "If you don't like that I'm the national champion, then F you." And then he threw a cameraman out of the vehicle. This was straight up idiotic. Plus, the concept is a tour of the United States with the title. But when the title was introduced, the point was for it to be defended internationally, which was also the point of the All-Atlantic turned international title, thanks to Shazam! Fury of the Gods. And that never happened. So now AEW does legitimately have 4 men's mid-card singles titles that there's basically no differentiation between any of them other than the Continental Classic happening once annually, but that title can even be defended when the Classic is not happening. It is asinine, and it is ridiculously inconsistent. There was another dumb video with Perry on Dynamite where he climbed a rock and said he was at the top of the mountain. And then he said the exact same line. If you don't like that I'm the national champion, then F you. Wow. Such a badass, bro. On Dynamite, Roosh beat a jobber, his 3rd random meaningless squash in as many weeks. He screamed his catchphrase again after the bell. He also got a brief video package where, again, he basically just said his catchphrase. Commentary said he's on a path of destruction. He's beating jobbers. He's saying one line every week. There's no promo, no character work, no direction. He's not beating anyone of value. What are you talking about? And finally, on Dynamite, Speedball beat AR Fox in another meaningless match. So that's AEW TV this week. 16 matches, 5 or 6 maybe of them mattered. Of those, half were actually relevant in terms of building stuff. The rest were just 10 mans and people who other people in their faction are fighting, so now they're fighting. I got to tell you, like I said, this was the most frustrating week of AEW television in a long time. Usually, Dynamite is solid, Collision is worthless. Some weeks they're both good. Some weeks they're both mediocre. This week, I legitimately thought both episodes were bad. And that's the first time in a long time. They had some of those at the end of 2025 that I didn't love that much. But this is like the first in months where I found almost nothing. I mean, again, I don't think I praised a single segment. This is not I don't like AEW thing. I judge everything exactly the same. Logic is so important to me. I just went through however many, 25, 30 segments. And it's just like who's booking this? Tony Khan says it's all him. You got to get some other people in that room, man. You got to have the equivalent of a showrunner, someone who's checking you. Why are they doing this? Why is he fighting this person? Why is she fighting that person? It makes the show extremely difficult to watch. All right, that wraps up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. I appreciate all of you being with us on a Friday morning, a little bit later than our normal published schedule. We had so much to tape with Vintage, and I had a lot of work to do personally, but we got the show out. I'm glad everyone's enjoying it. A reminder that we, of course, have our full WWE Backlash Ultimate preview that you should be listening to before Saturday's show. And then Saturday night, as soon as that goes off the air, you will have your WWE Backlash instant analysis. Don't forget to follow us on social media at Getting Overcast. Not only do you get episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, you can listen to the show and watch full-length video interviews over on YouTube. Of course, all the other stuff is on Twitter and Blue Sky. Over there, you will see pre- and post-show polls posted for WWE Backlash, your expectation grade, your final grade. You will have the opportunity to vote in them. Make sure you follow us across the board at Getting Overcast. Please remember, here at Getting Over,
It's all about the five.
so head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. And please do not forget,
I happen to love the number 5.
hope you do as well. $5 a month, $50 for the entire year. You can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You will get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes of professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show, and exclusive news analysis posts every week. Again, please support us financially a little bit as we continue supporting you with free performance-enhancing audio. All right, that wraps up this edition of the show. We'll be back with you on Saturday for Vintage Chris Vanini earlier. This is the Silver King Adam Silverstein signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.